So what happens at the conference? I'm going to give you another try at it too. Sustainability. What do you call it?
No,
we'll get everybody on board. You'll say, I agree with them, but do you add something?
I would agree with Kevin. We don't know what it is, but I think Kevin's answer is a great one, because we as humans are part of that natural ecological system.
Right.
So we're the ones that have taken the balance away of sustainability by adding to the built environment in a non-sustainable way. So we're talking about, let's break it down. So we're talking about building in a way that's not wasteful, building in a way that's renewable, building in a way that is what? What are we talking about? I think building in a way that allows for, and I think Oren Lyons' quote is a great one, allows for future generations, all the generations. I mean, he talks about the 7th generation, which is really forever in terms of the Native Americans. How do we build so that the generations that follow can have the same resources, the same world that we have today, and maybe not what we have today, maybe what we had in the past. So how do you build without using energy? Mm-hmm. How do you build by recycling materials so you're not using new materials? How do you build with an environment? We spend, I don't know how much time, Kevin, inside.
90% of our time, according to the EPA, is spent indoors.
So we spend a lot of time inside. How do we build an environment that is healthy for humans? And those are some of the things that I would look at in terms of sustainability.
It's interesting that this movement, and Kevin, you were a builder. Did you always build in this way? No, right? You built like everybody else did, in a traditional sense, or was your company's core value always to build in a way that was considerate of nature?
I actually graduated from the College of Environmental Science and Forestry. When I graduated, it was the first OPEC oil embargo. So my first job was out of state, so I was one of those guys who had to walk to work, because it didn't matter if I had an odd or even license plate. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get gas. So my first house was a passive house, so I think I've always had those core values. But what we try to do now...
Passive meaning, what does that mean?
Core values?
What is passive house?
Oh, passive. That it basically we're not using an active system. We're using the sun to heat and essentially to cool our houses. You know, designing with nature in mind. So we're designing with deciduous trees on the southern side, so that during the summer when the sun's at its highest and hottest, the leaves are on the trees and they shade us. But in the wintertime, they lose the leaves, and we need the solar thermal characteristics of the sun that allows it to heat the house for us. So. My house, you know, the thermostat for my house is essentially the sun. It's as simple as that.
You're heating totally by solar?
Actually, passive solar.
Passive solar.
Correct. Yep. Not an active system. I don't have any photovoltaic panels in my house at all. Yep. So I think what we're striving to do in the built environment, and I think Paul has some involvement with this as well, is regenerative building. So we're looking to actually design and build buildings that can clean and purify water, generate more electricity than what they use. So we're actually becoming part of nature, and how nature always has a feedback loop. There's nothing that's not closed in nature. That's how we have to have our houses.
All right, so help us out, Paul. He says you're the expert here. What are we talking about? Regenerative construction, is that the word that he used?
Regenerative was the term. So if we think in a series of sort of a progression, we are really very interested in figuring out a first step would be a green building method, and I think green gets thrown around a lot, but people generally understand it to be better for the environment, a better way of doing things. The next step would be sustainable, meaning that in fact we've eliminated, we're not doing anything that is having a damage on the environment. So as Peter mentioned, right, we can leave this just the same way we found it, and it can be that way for our children and their children. And then regenerative would be recognizing that we've actually done a lot of stuff in the environment that we really need to clean up and fix up. And I think, you know, Syracuse has examples of sort of its chemical past, its contamination, its history. Can we do things with our building that help take steps to actually leave the place a little bit better than we found it? And so Kevin's point was that I think, you know, we are recognizing that we're on that path. We're taking the steps in the direction moving from green to sustainable to regenerative, and that's really, you know, the direction that we want to assist with people who come to the conference.
Peter, you're some of the things you do at your company, for example, when I read that you give incentives for people who bicycle to work or other things that they do within your company.
Yeah, I think we're trying to take it from, as both Kevin and Paul indicate, from the built environment to the home environment. And at the same time, using our building as an educational tool for ourselves and our staff and our clients. How can we teach that to our employees, or how can they teach us? Because some of them are ahead of us. So what can you do in the home environment that will start to make things better, as Paul just described? The regenerative building is something that is a goal for all of us. It's not easy to do today, but I think if you look at Kevin, he did 1973, 74, Kevin. I'm guessing I'm probably putting his age there, but I can remember the even and odd gas lines in 1972, and there was a lot of thinking about passive solar and looking at the energy that's free. The sun's energy is free energy. The wind is free energy. The water, if there's running water, that's free energy. We used to have mills that used that energy. Now, did they pollute the water? Yeah, maybe. So how do you do it without that? So thinking about what we have in nature that's free, but then not taking away, and making sure that we're not polluting it at the end of the day as well.
Your LEED certification is an area that companies or buildings, it's a standard for buildings. What does it mean to be LEED certified? And that's what you're going to be talking about at the conference, as I understand it. Your headquarters, your new headquarters downtown Syracuse, is LEED certified. What does that mean?
It's not quite LEED certified.
Not
we're in the
quite.
process.
Oh,
it's a
okay.
long process.
So you didn't get the designation, but you
we're
teach.
we're in the process.
You're in the process. It's a long process.
Yeah, it's a long process. We're seeking LEED Platinum, which currently is.
Oh, but that's the highest level.
That's the highest level.
Yeah. Okay.
What that is really, the LEED is really a prescriptive checklist, and I think that's where we as architects or builders have to be careful at some level that we're not just following that checklist, because that isn't going to get us to the regenerative and really back to looking at the natural environment and trying to mimic that in our buildings.
Right.
What the LEED guidelines look at is 5 different areas. They look at site, they look at water, they look at energy and atmosphere. So again, the kind of pollution that we might be putting back into the atmosphere depending on how much energy or the type of energy that we use, unless we're using the sun's energy, and then there is no pollution. They look at materials and resources, and they look at what we talked about earlier, the indoor environmental quality. So we spend over 90% of our time indoors as human beings. How do we generate an indoor environmental quality that's healthy for us? So LEED Platinum is not regenerative construction or building. You can get LEED Platinum, and if you're saving 50% of the energy roughly of a new code compliant building, and you're recycling 75% of the materials that are deconstructed from the building. So it's something that you really have to think about and look at all the systems in the building and how they relate to each other.